thank you for coming to the Writers Showcase with Parkinson's Resources of Oregon. And I'm Libby Kennard, Program Coordinator. And with me is my co-host, Carol File, who will be assisting. And at this Writers Showcase, we are featuring writers who have Parkinson's disease who are in our local community. We serve Oregon and Southwest Washington. And we have a full agenda. And so I am going to do an introduction for each person, and then we'll get them unmuted. Each person has approximately 5 minutes, just to give you an idea of how much time you'll be with us today. And then we will have a reception. Okay. So our first presenter is Jim Sheedy. Jim's a retired academic, retired from a career as a vision scientist, and he was dean of a college of optometry. He held faculty positions at UC Berkeley, the Ohio State University, and Pacific University. His specialty was solving the eye problems caused by early computers. Now he is applying that knowledge of vision to artistry on canvas. There we go. As soon as you're unmuted, Jim, you have the floor.
I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are now.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I will read from Pondering Life, which I wrote it about 10 years ago, near the end of my career. My partner, Susan, will read it since I can't read well.
Okay. Yes, thank you. No, that's okay. This is from Jim's book. Observing the world around us. The external world that our ego perceives is filled with an amazing array of objects, both inanimate and animate. We perceive the objects in our environment with our senses of vision, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. Based upon the signals that our ego receives from our senses, we are able to distinguish most of the objects in our environment from one another. The objects in our environment generally fall into categories, and the relationship we have with each strongly depends upon the category. For example, our ego perceives rocks, soil, clouds, and water as inanimate objects. We can admire them for their beauty and utility, but our relationship with them is one-sided. We perceive them as non-living things. We don't have a personal relationship with them. This is why the pet rock, a 1970s fad, was so clever. The concept itself was an oxymoron. The next level of objects consists of plants, trees, bushes, grasses, and flowers, crops. We know they are living and we respect that. In many cases, we provide care for plants, although this is usually in order to harvest them for food or building materials. We can also have a personal or feeling relationship with a plant that we care for in our home. But our relationship with plants are almost entirely one-sided. Plants are not mobile, and to our knowledge, they do not see or hear or have the capacity to think. Our ego relates to plants, but we don't have any evidence that they relate to us in any way other than passively receiving water, sunshine, air, and fertilizer, and occupying space on the landscape. The lower animals are next, and what a wide variety among them. We relate to lower animals such as amoebae and insects similarly as we do to plants. We know that they are living. We respect that, but we don't feel that they are relating to us. Next are animals such as fishes, amphibians, and reptiles. We understand them to be self-directed animals with a brain. We can relate to them. We also know that, in a rudimentary way, they relate to us, if only to avoid us when they perceive us. We have a rudimentary shared relationship with these lower animals. Following them are the birds and mammals, everything from groundhogs to squirrels, to mice to deer to tigers to parrots to dogs and more. We can typically relate better with birds and mammals than to fishes and amphibians and reptiles. We can make almost any mammal a pet, or at least captive in a zoo or circus, and develop a behavioral relationship in which we both develop reactions to the other's actions. This is especially true for domesticated animals such as horses, dogs, and cats. We clearly assign to them an ego and mortal feelings, and even give them a name. We have a reciprocal relationship with mammals, and that we can identify with them. We even attribute human-like thoughts and feelings to them. These animals clearly have behavioral patterns and instincts. We know they're not our cognitive equals, but we can develop a caring and feeling relationship with them. And then there are the apes, monkeys, and chimpanzees. When we come face to face with one of these primates, the relationship we feel can be considerably stronger than with other mammals. The human-like facial features and expressions cause us to also assign them human-like attributes. The relationship we feel with an ape, monkey, or chimpanzee encroaches upon the boundary between animal and human, which can be both intriguing and unsettling. And then we observe humans in our environment, animate beings that are the same as we. Our ego knows that every human being also has an ego. The shared relationship has an overall sense of parity. We relate to other human beings on a very special way. The relationship we feel with other humans usually transcends other relationships we have with objects or animals in our environment. The relationship with other humans has a sense of commonality and sharing that strikes to the core of our own ego. The sense of group resides in the vision-based cognition of the right brain. Human group abilities have transcended those of animals because of the contributions of our speech-based left brain.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Libby. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jim. And thanks, Susan. Our next writer who we're going to hear his work is Barry Wolfe. And Barry is a retired licensed psychologist. He began writing short articles for the purpose of clarifying his thoughts, feelings, and confusion after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2004. He continues the quest with the support of his wife, Devora. More recently, he has been writing some memoirs. And we are going to have Carol File read his writings for us. And I also am going to have them on the screen. So Carol, I'll get this first one up. Okay, now are you seeing it first of all as it should be, or are you seeing windows over top of it? Are you only seeing the work? Can I see Carol Klupney communicating, so it looks good? Okay.
Adventures in Higher Education by Barry Wolfe. In my third year of graduate school, I heard from a fellow student that a local community college was looking for part-time instructors in their psychology department. So I contacted the school and scheduled an interview. I passed the interview and was told I would be called when they knew when a teacher was needed. One afternoon, about 2 weeks later, I received a call from a secretary saying they had a class for me. She said it meant once a week from 6 to 9 p.m. I readily accepted and asked for the start date. I was told, today. I replied, that's only a few hours from now, and I don't yet have reliable transportation. I lived about 40 miles away. The secretary said, I'm sorry, we'll have to find someone else. I was very disappointed. One of the people living in our group house overheard the call and offered to lend me her car for the evening. I immediately called the school back and said I would show up that day. I was fairly confident that I could find an inexpensive but reliable car quickly, since I lived in a major college town and people traded and sold used cars frequently. So I heaved a sigh of relief and started to prepare for my first venture as a college instructor. The first 2 weeks went relatively well. On my way to the third class, I had a flat tire about 2 miles from my destination. I pulled my car off the road and looked up and saw, barely 200 yards away, what Roadside America said was the largest tire in the world, advertising a popular brand. The irony was not lost on me. Fortunately, I had an intact spare tire. The car limped to the nearest highway exit, and I got to class on time. The trap of self-pity. I will wait. The Trap of Self-Pity by Barry Wolfe. Those of us who are challenged with a chronic disabling illness will probably from time to time ask ourselves, why me? There is rarely a satisfying answer for the individual, and the risk is falling into the trap of feeling sorry for oneself, or what is called self-pity. As a psychologist with Parkinson's disease, I also have found myself starting to wallow in self-pity. I attempt to do what I've advised many clients in similar circumstances. Don't ignore your negative feelings of anger, frustration, sadness, confusion, and fear. But once you have labeled these feelings, move on to an emotionally positive place. The human brain seeks closure and doesn't like not knowing. But replace why me with, considering the real obstacles, what can I do now and in the future to make my life as good as possible? This approach works for me and provides an avenue to prevent digging a self-pity hole, which is harder to get out of the deeper it gets. Professional help or help from a support person may be useful to assist in clarifying what needs to be done mentally to prevent chronic self-pity. Dependence, Independence, and Interdependence by Barry Wolfe. Years ago, my mother became disabled and lost much freedom of movement. She was struggling to accept this. One day, I drove her to an appointment, got out of the car, and opened her door. This was met with an annoyed, I can open the door myself. The next day, under similar circumstances, I intentionally didn't help with her door. This time I heard, "I can't get out of the car myself, don't you know that?" Now that I have a disability with fluctuating symptoms, I can see my mother's dilemma more clearly. I both welcome and resent offers of physical aid when I am struggling to walk. But my annoyance peaks when I'm asked 3 or more times within 5 minutes if I need help, when I've repeatedly declined it. My best option is to firmly but respectfully say, "No thanks," but not be so bullheaded as to decline help when it is needed. Appreciating offers of help while asserting my independence is a challenge to work on. Our society places great value on independence and autonomy, self-sufficiency. The founders of our nation wrote much about freedom and declaring independence. Although this perspective has value and pervades our culture, another view suggests that complete independence is a myth and isn't really possible or even desirable. We're all interdependent as parts of many systems, be they the way we get our food, emotional support, and other systems. We need others, and others need us. The value of a support group cannot be overstated when dealing with serious concerns such as PD. Identifying with others who experience similar challenges can provide empathic support and inspiration to keep trying our best. Singing together creates connection, solidarity, and an awareness that we are not alone in our struggles. So, while independence has its place, interdependence is both a desirable and vital part of life as well. We give, we receive. We share our joys and sorrows with our friends in interdependence and support.
Thank you, Carol. And thanks, Barry, for sharing your work. The next person we have is F. Richard Thomas, who goes by Dick. He has several chapbooks and 4 full-length books of poems from various publishers. He and his wife are contemplating a major move to Corvallis from Las Cruces, New Mexico, within the next couple of years. He is in Oregon now and eager to get to know some of the other writers in the area. As soon as you're unmuted. There we go.
Seems like everyone I know has made a desk or a table out of a sheet of plywood or a door and piece of particle board. So this poem is titled My Desk. Is the sound okay? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Good. My desk. White and laminated, a door on 2 small carpenter's horses where my computer sits, surrounded by yellow pads, file folders, gel pens, a clutter of paper clips. Tilting on top of manuscripts, a small white plate, scattered breadcrumbs, sugar, cinnamon, half-empty coffee cup, stained around the lip. Though floaters glide over my retina, hands and fingers cramp. Wind rustles outside in the oleander, and the neighbor's chihuahua yelps. These fall away as I cross the threshold and begin again to travel this odd and magical particle board continent. Notice that beautiful crescent moon we've had for the past week or so. This poem is titled Crescent Moon. Perhaps it is the moon itself, the clear articulation of its 2 points, suspended just above the dark peaks, that calls me to the back porch. I take my seat in the plastic lawn chair where untranslatable tongues of light and dark roll over earth, with just the right number of words, not too many, not too few. In a voice that makes loss seem inevitable, but bliss possible. In a language that falls in a lovely curve from the lip of creation. And my last one is titled Butter. Butter, B-U-T-T-E-R. For boiled potatoes, tender peas, and toasted cheese, on crackers with chili or soft boiled eggs, for sauteing salmon, garlic, or veal, or lobster tails or escargot, nothing is better than butter. When God created the world, he said, "Let there be butter." And he saw that it was good, like man, ribs, woman, holy water, and beer. I believe in butter. I buy my daily lot in 10-pound tins, simmer it on the stove as incense for the house. After showers, I rub it on my elbows, knees, and hands, use it to part my hair, and oh, how great it is for sticky drawers and making love. But my clothes don't fit. My wife and kids tell me to quit. The doctor says I've got to stop. During the day, I feign cutting down, but at night before I sleep, I anoint my lips, rub it under my nose and on my chest like Vicks, put one glob in the center of my forehead and, buttered again, know the Lord my soul will take if I should die before I wake. When I die, I'll slide heavenward on the golden greased pathway to God, my body and soul fat and slithery with piety.
Thank you, Dick. That was wonderful. Our next presentation is going to be by David. David Schneider's piece for today is culled from a 5,000-word short story, The Joke Machine. That's from several years ago, and it's a bit dated. It's a look at a day in the life of a guy with Parkinson's disease. And what David said is, what I found interesting about writing the story was that I wrote the whole thing in 2 segments in about 2 hours plus. You sometimes read about writers writing pieces that gush out of them like a suddenly released fire hydrant. That's how this story came about for me. And I'm going to put it up on the screen as well. So give me a moment to do that. And Carol, if you can let him unmute. And as soon as you're unmuted, David, you're good to go. You're ready, David. Oh, well, you were. Mhm. All right, I can't see you because of my recording process. Carol, if you can see what's going on with David, I've tried to prompt him to unmute.
Okay, I just did.
Okay, very good.
I'm back on sound here.
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, the story is entitled Down on the Farm, and you can see the spelling there on the screen. The pharmacy was located in a rather dimly lit, dark basement corner. Nice touches, thinks Peyton Dillard, and not for the first time. Well, it was hard not to notice. A dark, difficult to access drug counter for a large number of customers with poor or failing eyesight and limited mobility. Peyton and I'm having a little trouble with this. Peyton holds a, Peyton hoofs it over to the drug area and takes a spot at the end of the line. It looks like a fairly long wait, and he's already he's already stewing about the 500 all out-of-pocket dollars this visit will cost him. To amuse himself, he formulates a question. What changes would really help the pharmacy get things right? For starters, they should make wearing masks and carrying firearms mandatory for all employees behind the counter. Then they could replace the pickup sign with a more accurate stick up. Peyton looks around for a suggestion box, the kind that asks a question like, how can we best serve you? Take the time to fill this card out and let us know how we're doing. You might as well, since the estimated time to talk to a pharmacist is a good 45 minutes. On second thought, get the hell out of here. Go home to take care of your business on the internet the way most people do. And remember that at our company, quality customer service is a slogan, not just a phrase. With no formal means to critique the quality of the experience, Peyton has to settle for listening to snatches of conversation around him. Pharmacist number 1. I'm afraid this new medication is a little more expensive than what you've been taking. Customer A, why am I not surprised? Pharmacist number 2, did the doctor tell you about the potential side effects of tetrodotoxinol? Customer B, only in general terms. Pharmacist number 2, well, in clinical trials, 89% of the subjects who took it developed all-body softball-sized infected boils, a bit like that scene in Alien, one where the alien pops out of the doctor's chest. But the boils you'll most likely encounter won't pop, they'll just sort of fester. Customer B, would that be a 12 or 14-inch softball? Pharmacist number 2, I don't play softball, but read about what you can look forward to in this pamphlet. I tell you to give us a call if you have any other questions, but when this stuff kicks in, I doubt you'll be coherent enough or have the strength to even pick up a phone. Customer B, that's okay as long as I can drive. Customer D to customer C, who is paying a relatively cheap bill. Boy, I'd like to get out of here for that price. Customer C, oh yeah? Come back tomorrow when I pick up my other 5 prescriptions and tell me if you still feel the same way. Pharmacist number 3, and you continue to have no insurance coverage? Customer E, hey doc, do I talk funny or something? Because we don't seem to be communicating too well. I come in here every time you ask me the same question. And guess what? Every time in here, I still got the same chronic disease. People with a chronic disease, they can't get insurance. Got it? Now on, I'm operating under the theory that this little speech has ensured your assurance that I won't hear no more about insurance. Hey, Vito, go give this guy his pound of flesh and meet me back at the car. I gotta go buy my daughter a stuffed bunny rabbit for her birthday. A milestone of sorts here, Peyton believes, possibly the first instance of a patient enrolling a doctor in a state high risk pool. Pharmacist number 4 to customer F. If you're having trouble with payments, we have some exciting new programs that might be of help. Perhaps something can be worked out. To give you just one example, our indentured servitude plan has created quite a buzz. And I note from your file you have a young child. Would that be your firstborn? Peyton's head is spinning, but he's not entirely surprised. His overtaxed brain has been known to to blow the odd gasket on pharmacy visits. Nevertheless, who or what is responsible for today's production? It's not quite Fellini Roma, maybe more like Fellini Roman. When Polanski meets Fellini, perhaps coming away with a splitting headache is a small price to pay, unlike the $500 Peyton has just left on the counter. With his meds in hand, he beats a hasty retreat back up to the light. Whew, that took some doing. I apologize. I probably should have had somebody reading for me as well, but there you go.
Thank you, David. That is quite a dark humor as you had promised. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to some of those issues. And it was fine. We're all a supportive audience here.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next person up who we will want to get unmuted is Karen Mason. So Karen Banov Mason has written and taught poetry for many years at both secondary and university levels, as well as in writing workshops. You may have read about her in our most recent Parkinson's Perspective newsletter. Today, she's going to share some poetry, and now she writes more humorous essays. And I'm going to also share the screen for Karen. So Karen, just give me a moment to get your first piece up.
While you're doing that, can I just say that I chose to read poetry because I don't write it anymore, but I enjoy reading it. So I would like to read some of the poems I wrote, and also, but I am writing more humorous essays, and that's what I sent to the pro paper.
Okay, we have your first one up, Stored Memory.
Okay, the first one is about memory and how, because it's so important to people our age. And it was given to me to write. I was given a glass knob and said, write about this knob. So the poem goes, memory opens the door into the dark pantry of the past, a prismed glass knob. It fits icy in my palm. Mechanical workings clink and clank on turns as they emanate the scent of a rusted whisk. I peer in, see on shelves, jarred years neatly nested, row after row, persimmon skin bitter or summer peach sweet. Our early years nourish us as we relish the taste. The next one I'm going to read is called On Overcoming Pain. After all the years of pain from birthing babies and poems, from leaning over cribs filled with sleeping children, cardboard moving boxes, teacher desks, and student papers, I've learned to sway to the rhythm of my slowing, often gyrating body. I trust in the years and am free.
Pause just a moment for
Sure.
me, because I'm a little
Okay.
bit slower than you are.
No way.
There we go. Okay.
Frustration. We turned back only a mile from the summit. I plan to write a poem about how I would not become Sisyphus, unable to reach the top of the hill. But as the trail grew steeper and more rocky, we both lost our reserve. I fretted about your red-faced and labored breath. You worried about my painful limp. Sweat poured from both of our bodies. Stinging eyes and slippery limbs made even more misery. I wanted to affirm you wanted to affirm your stamina. I only wanted to keep that moss-covered rock moving uphill. Next one. The next one is COVID conversation. Okay. This is a really not good title for this poem. I have to think of a better title. But anyway, I wrote it during COVID. Hey, let's talk about talking, not just self-talk to remind my failing brain when I walk from the office to the bedroom across the hall, just a 3-second journey. Your purple reading glasses, I say to myself, or maybe the book of Mary Oliver's poetry you read at 3 a.m. when your legs ran a race under the Afghan while you never left the starting line. More than a tool to help me remember, more than a desire to hear my own voice, strong, clear, loud, before it softens to silence. Encouragement is what I yearn for. Okay, I say to the me who manages to rise unaided from the bed sheets, wrinkled from turning and twisting all night. I totter to the sink and sigh at lines on my once smooth face. A mantra comes to my mouth. You've got this, I say. You can do this day, like you did yesterday and the day before, over and over and over. I keep saying these words again and again and again. I can still hear them from my mouth to my ears. I only wish they came from someone else. The last one is called acceptance. If I take a step, I will walk. I will climb the mountain I failed to climb a year ago. I will find that waterfall that eluded me that whole hot day on the path in the Bitterroot. I will stop again by the rocky creek, not because I have to, but because I want to hear the water tumble across the rocks and over the lichen, the gray and green blending as I stare at them long enough, this time knowing that I can. And if I don't get to the top, I'll bathe in cool waters of that fall to the pool where they drop and gather. I will taste their sweetness, and I will rejoice in the glint of the sun.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, so our next presenter is George, and we'll get George unmuted. If Carol, if you could do that, I think. George is a writer and a lawyer, storyteller, and spiritual seeker. George practiced law for 40 years in New York City and Washington, D.C. He was active with the Omega Institute for more than 30 years. Omega is a nonprofit organization located in Rhinebeck, New York. Now he and Helen reside in Eugene, and I'm so happy to know them. And he'll be reading from his book here. Okay. As long as you're unmuted, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. In 2017, I wrote Accidental Spirituality, and I'm going to read one of the stories from there. Where are tomorrow's leaders? Papa, what's your battle plan? My granddaughter Natalia has asked me that question for the 3 years we've been having imaginary galactic battles. Her army is mainly Pokemon, popular characters that came to us from Japan. They have strengths and weaknesses and the capacity to evolve and gain in ability and talent. Natalia is also aided by the usual assortment of additional friends. Fairies, ponies, and favorite animals stuffed on her bed, all lined up on the side of goodness and truth. My army is made up of trolls, gremlins, dragons, and the like, all nefarious creatures that are deliciously despicable, untrustworthy, and vulnerable. I respond, I have a million battle plans. My gremlins can invade our home through the electric wires, scoot down the chimney, hide in the ice cubes, squat inside her toothpaste. I can freeze her fairies, melt her ponies, blow her over with tornadoes, and put sleeping potion in the water she drinks, all causing dreadful mischief. But to no avail. For every weapon I devise, Natalia has a counter weapon that is stronger, better, faster, and smarter. The rules are clear. I am to lose every time. I engage but do not triumph. I attempt but do not succeed. My job is to surrender and be destroyed. I don't make it too easy, but above all, I don't win. When we are on a common wavelength, joy radiates from Natalia's body. When I have overstepped my role, I am either lovingly reprimanded or scolded. Those are the unspoken ground rules, but they are not my strategy, my real battle plan. My real battle plan is to love Natalia without limit, to be in her world without condition, and to be her ally forever. I want her to remember my presence, not my words, my deeds, not my promises, my feelings, and not my affect. Today she is into buttons and bows. Tomorrow she is into buttons and bows. At issue in these battles is more than goodness over evil, grace over mischief, or even girls over boys. We are in the world of make-believe, and that world may be more important to our future than we can ever know. Make-believe leads to magic, and magic sparks imagination. Imagination feeds creativity, and creativity is the source from which all life springs. Stultify creativity, and the wellspring of life dries up. Feed creativity, and the world is bathed in light. Perhaps you are thinking it is impossible to change the world from its current trajectory. If that is your concern, perhaps you will find comfort in the conversation between Alice and the Queen of Hearts. There's no use trying, said Alice. One can't believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. When I was younger, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. We live in a world that believes leaders are forged through qualities like discipline, structure, and will. That has not worked well so far. So let us posit a world in which leaders are forged through such qualities as love, tenderness, space, and freedom. These leaders of tomorrow are today's children and our future. They believe it is impossible in impossible things and the power of magic. If we cultivate their dreams, we can reap a harvest of hope and a bounty of endless possibilities. Our work is to keep the windows open, the doors ajar, and the pathways clear.
Thank you, George. Okay.
you.
Carol, if you can help get Carol Klupney unmuted, and I'll introduce her. Parkinson's takes so much away from us, but it gave Carol Klupney something new, the gift of storytelling. Through her blogs, social media posts, and live events, Carol shares what it's like to be a middle-aged woman adventurer who has lived well 14 years since her diagnosis. Her book is The Ribbon of Road Ahead, One Woman's Remarkable Journey with Parkinson's Disease. Carol lives in Hermiston. She and her husband, Charlie, have raised 2 boys, and they enjoy traveling in their van, Dooley. There you go, Carol.
Thank you. I'm going to read you today from my unpublished stories. This one's called More or Less is Better. You decide. People with Parkinson's are well aware of their non-motor symptoms of the disease. One that particularly bothers me has to do with my urinary incontinence and urinary urgency. These are 2 symptoms that have caused me more stress and concern than many of my other challenges. Why is this? Well, as a small child, I, with my parents' help, had to work hard to learn to control my sphincter muscles. I needed to know when to hold them and when to let them go, so to speak. With that came a huge amount of independence, which I've enjoyed for my entire life since, up to now at least. It seems that I need to use the bathroom every hour. That is not always convenient, such as when I'm in jury duty or out on my bicycle in the desert and there's not a tree in sight, or camping far away from the bathroom. When I feel the urge to go, I head as quickly as my body will take me to the bathroom. Opening the door and seeing the toilet brings it on. This phenomenon has been reported to me by other women with Parkinson's. The toilet seems to have a remote control, or maybe a Bluetooth connected to the bladder. Heaven forbid if I can't get my pants down fast enough and myself turned around to sit on the toilet, because there is no stopping it. I've only had a few instances where I've totally lost control of my bladder. The warm stream of fluid running down my legs and filling up my shoes was not pleasant. But the most recent occurrence happened to be in Japan at the conference hall where I was attending the World Parkinson's Congress. During the afternoon session, I felt very fatigued. The conference organizers knew this might happen with people with Parkinson's and set aside an area for rest and rejuvenation. I found a mat in a curtain-off area, took off my shoes, and fell instantly asleep. I was having a dream. I bet you can guess what this is. About having to go to the bathroom. Oh no, it woke me up. Bing, 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 bing. My bodily alarm went off. Toilet, oh toilet, where are you? I didn't bother to put my shoes on in anticipation of them getting filled with pee anyway. And I ran as fast as I can run, around the corner, down the stairs, across the hallway, and into the women's restroom area, which consisted of several floor-to-ceiling stalls. As the lectures were going on, thankfully, there was no line at the restroom. I grabbed the door to the nearest stall, opened it, and there it was, the toilet. This was not just any toilet. This was a fancy Japanese toilet with all the bells and whistles. Seeing this extraordinary porcelain throne set off my bladder control, and the flood began. You would have thought that I had drank 2 gallons of water. It just kept coming, soaking my tan-colored cotton pants, my underwear, and my socks. Now what was I going to do? There's no way I could sneak out of the building unnoticed. And there was no way to get a hold of my husband, Charlie, either. What could he do to help anyway? We didn't carry spare clothes around with us. I was not going to open the door to the stall as the floodwaters were deep enough to leak out. And then I remembered the multifunctionality of these Japanese toilets. The first button I touched on the toilet gave me the sound of some nice calming birds tweeting away. I got a grip and gathered my thoughts. I had already removed the bottom half of my outfit. There was another button on the toilet that indicated spray. From the diagram, I could choose front spray or back spray, but I was glad I didn't get sprayed. I put my clothes in the toilet, utilized the front spray to rinse them, and I squeezed the water out as best as I could and rolled toilet paper on them to absorb as much excess liquid as possible. I looked at the other diagrams on the toilet for another option that might assist. Aha, it had an air blower. The air was one directional, but I managed to keep it going with one hand while holding my pants with the other hand. Within approximately 30 minutes, I had dried my underwear enough to wear them, and my pants looked pretty good too. I noticed I had completely forgotten my socks. Being fed up with this entire situation, I looked around for a garbage can for them, but the socks went in a little bag supplied for feminine hygiene products and into a tiny swinging door on the wall of the stall, never to be seen or smelled again, I hoped. Well, I carefully stepped over the puddle and in bare feet went to the sink to wash up. I caught a view of my pants in the mirror. They could have used a little touch up with an iron, but I didn't think the bathroom at the convention center had an iron. So on my way back to the relaxation and rejuvenation room to get my shoes and bag, I pinned a big grin on my face and nodded my head to everyone I met. I had a secret, and only I would know. Japanese toilets are multi-purpose units, limited only by the user's imagination. Now, I'm careful to drink soda or caffeine or alcohol before 5 p.m., as these things seem to be instigators of the problem. I use the bathroom regularly, especially when I know that I will be away for it for more than an hour. I found some discreet panty liners to help slow the flow should this ever happen again. I may not be able to control my bladder urgencies, but I can control conditions to eliminate them, no pun intended. Some of these challenges presented of my non-motor functions of Parkinson's disease. The end.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, next up is Tom Peterson, and Carol File, my coworker, if you could help ensure that he gets unmuted. Tom graduated from the University of Washington in 1963 with a BS in forestry logging engineering. After graduation, he married Nancy and joined the Air Force. He flew transports from California to Vietnam for 2 years and was exposed to Agent Orange, which is the VA thinks that that's the cause of his Parkinson's disease. He switched to flying high altitude reconnaissance for the next 2 years, which is what his story is about. And so I will let you hear from him this story. And Tom, are you ready and unmuted? Yes.
I think I'm unmuted, aren't I?
Yes, you're good.
I'm ready. Okay, the following article or the story was written 5 years ago for the Smithsonian Museum Air and Space magazine. The picture you're looking at there is called the RB-57F. It's an airplane that I doubt any of you have ever seen before or have ever heard of. It was created so that we could fly through the mushroom cloud following the detonation of a hydrogen bomb to take samples of the fallout. The caption under this picture says, able to loiter above 60,000 feet, which is significantly higher than any other jet airplane just about. The General Dynamics RB-57F Canberra was ideal for high altitude scientific observations, was capable of carrying 700-pound payload 3,000 miles. There are the stories about the ultimate cone of confusion. When the Air Force taught me to fly, my classmates and I were told the one instrument that would never fail us was a little alcohol-filled magnetic compass that every airplane has mounted right directly in the pilot's line of sight. The instructor who imparted this wisdom had never flown into the ultimate cone of confusion, the one over the magnetic north and south poles, where the magnetic lines of force are vertical, so north is straight down. 12 miles up, the cone is wide enough to make the compass spin like a merry-go-round for several seconds while it tries to find north. In the winter of 68 and 69, there was a period of peak solar activity. The number and size of sunspots were high in the sun's 11-year cycle. And a big sunspot, or a group of them, could be a clue that we should expect what is now called a coronal mass ejection, or CME, which is an eruption from the surface of the sun of radioactive particles. They're focused like a beam from a flashlight and originate from most active areas of the solar surface. So a grouping of sunspots could indicate that a CME is likely, and it could be pointed at the Earth. Solar radiation is blocked from the surface of the Earth by the magnetosphere, the magnetic lines of force that surround the planet. The radiation follows these magnetic pathways around the curvature of the Earth and enters the atmosphere at the north and the south magnetic poles. The northern and southern lights are visible evidence of this process. In the summer of 1859, 100 years before I joined the Air Force, observers recorded seeing an enormous sunspot. It was named the Carrington event for British astronomer Richard Carrington, who determined that that activity on the sun can create geomagnetic disturbances on the Earth. This event was powerful enough to send sparks shooting out of telegraph machines in North America and Europe. The northern lights were seen as far south as Cuba and Hawaii, and a CME of that magnitude today hitting the Earth could be potentially catastrophic given our reliance on satellites and electronics. But in 1968, 110 years later, when sunspot activity was high, observers believed that a CME was possible and it might be directed at the Earth. If this happened, the scientific community wanted an airplane equipped with radiation measuring apparatus positioned over the magnetic North Pole at its maximum altitude to stay there as long as fuel permitted. At the same time, the Boeing Supersonic Transport, the SST, and the British-French Concorde were being developed. Both airplanes would fly at high altitude between North America and Europe. And some of these flights would pass close to the magnetic pole, and their passengers could be exposed to solar radiation. Apollo spacecraft were also beginning to fly, and the astronauts would be exposed to this radiation. No one knew how much or what kind of radiation might be a result of a big CME pointed at the Earth, or what effect this radiation would have on the astronauts or their people aboard aircraft. Nor did we have a good understanding of how solar radiation might affect the delicate electronics of an airplane or a satellite. The 58th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, based in Kirtland Air Force Base, Albuquerque, New Mexico, had the only airplane for the job. The RB-57F with a crew of 2, a pilot and a navigator. You can change the picture, Libby. Both pilot and navigator wearing spacesuits. Can you go up with a picture, Abby? Libby? Anyway, generally, there we the picture of Bill and I. There we are, both of us wearing spacesuits. The General Dynamics modified B-57 into the B-57F, and by doubling the surface area of the wings and tail and upgrading the engines to produce twice as much thrust. The 58th flew the long wing for a variety of high altitude tests, including sampling debris following a nuclear test, sniffing the air for evidence of nuclear tests by other nations, recording the radiation of the atmosphere, and photographing the development of thunderstorms, to much other things. Just after Thanksgiving in 1968, Bill and I flew to Eielson Air Force Base near Fairbanks, Alaska. We'd flown north from Eielson toward the geographic pole many times on other radiation measuring missions, but this would be our first mission to the magnetic pole. After a pair of practice runs to collect baseline data, we stood by waiting for word of a solar flare. With luck, we would record a sample CME. On our first flight to the pole, we learned that our supposedly infallible magnetic compass became unusable in the ultimate cone of confusion. This was a novelty, not a crisis. The compass was not the navigator's only tool. And if you're beyond the range of electronics, navigation aids like the middle of the ocean or the North Pole, the navigator has a sextant that he can use to determine his position via the sun, moon, or stars. And returning to the pole, once the compass finally stabilized, was always north, no matter where you were on the edge of the cone. And when it came time to return to Eielson, some object, the moon, the stars, northern lights, would be visible. So depending on the time of night, Bill told me to turn right or left until one of these was where he wanted it on the canopy. At 60,000 feet, the horizon is 300 miles away. So you can see lots of things on the surface of the earth to keep yourself oriented. Flying at those latitudes at night, it seemed like we were flying right through the northern lights. They're actually more than 100 miles above us, but when they are brilliant and stretch from horizon to horizon, it seems like you're flying inside them. Rarely seen anything quite so beautiful. Following our flight to the pole on December 12th, just after a CME that was aimed at the Earth, Bill and I were sent home because the dosimeters that we always wore indicated we had received a higher dose of radiation than an X-ray technician would be permitted in a month. Something else I remember on our last flight over the pole, I saw a bright vertical green line that lasted less than a second. Bill did not see it. At our post-flight debriefing, I mentioned the flash of light and was told by the scientists and the medical folks that no one had ever heard of anything like that. The flight surgeon found nothing unusual looking at my eyes, so it was recorded and forgotten. Some years later, I read of astronauts seeing the same green line. The current thinking is that my optic nerve had been hit by a cosmic ray, which likely originated from a supernova somewhere in outer space. On the surface of the Earth, we're protected from these by the magnetosphere. And today, when solar flare activity is high and pointed at the Earth, commercial flights, airliners, are diverted away from the pole. Radio communications have been interfered with, and satellites are turned away from the sun to protect astronauts and electronics. It's a good thing Santa Claus knows the route from the North Pole by heart, because if he flies over the magnetic pole, a spinning compass will be no help to him. I also wonder if he's ever been concerned about radiation from the sun. There you go.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, we're down to our last two presentations. And the next one is Margaret Caldwell. Carol, if you can help see that Margaret can get unmuted. Margaret takes her inspiration from her daughter, who was an author of several books. She enjoys writing short stories about her life. She loves to travel. The happiest time in her life was when she lived in the middle of the South Pacific on the Cook Islands. And she has 4 children and 6 grandchildren who she loves to go visit. Okay, Margaret, you've got the floor.
Thank you. The drive home seemed long and tedious. As I sat in the passenger seat, I wearily stared out of the window. This was a drive I took often, and yet today it looked totally different from just a few days ago. It was typical Halloween weather. The wind sent fallen autumn leaves into the miniature windwheels of gold and brown. The road was rain-soaked and slippery. Strange, sempre things happen this time of year. Ghosts, goblins, and things like that are bumping the night. Maybe it was the Halloween season that made me edgy. I was aware of the package in the back seat and looked back at it often to make sure it was still there. It was just a small bundle, but I knew there was something that was going to change my life forever. Where it had come from, I could barely remember. I just was too tired to think. Finally, home came into view. It was getting darker now in the late afternoon. I climbed out of the car, exhausted. My chest hurt and I was hungry. I felt like I hadn't eaten for a long time. Carefully, I picked up the bundle and went inside. The home seemed different. Something changed since I left 2 days ago. I would figure that something had changed later. Now I had to do something with this package. My tired brain told me to put it in the next bedroom next to mine, and I would heal it with sometime in the next few hours. Right now, I needed to go to bed. Almost instantly, I fell asleep. Sleep didn't last very long. Over and over, I would fall asleep and then wake up with a jolt. Where was I? What was that noise? Was someone in the heart? Did someone come in and steal the package? Each time I woke up, I dragged myself out of bed, crept down the hall, and cautiously opened the door just a crack to see if the bundle was still there. It was. Back in bed after the 6th trip to the other room, I laid my aching head and tired body down in hopes to sleep, but this time sleep wouldn't come. My mind began to race. What had I done? Where was that bundle? What should I do with it? I couldn't remember all the instructions that came with it. What if I broke it? I tossed and turned and thought of all the things that would go wrong. The howling wind didn't help. After a while, I could feel myself beginning to relax and to ease into sleep, when suddenly a strange sound came from the room next to mine. It grew in intensity. I flew out of bed and fell over the dog that rushed in to make sure of the room, to alarm me that someone or something was in the house making a sound that had never been in that house before. Throwing on my robe and putting on my slippers on the same time, I ran into the room and flung open the door. With a sigh and a smile, I said, "Hi, baby Laura. How is my little baby hungry?" The end.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay. Our final presenter is Diana Lubarsky. Carol, please help get us switched over. Diana grew up on Long Island and she worked as a physical therapist for her career, but she's very multi-talented. She's a writer and a sculptor. She read her poetry last year at our first virtual art show. And so I invited her again to this program today.
Hi, everyone. I'm still deciding which poems to read even as we speak, but I'll read you this one I love. It's called Breezes. The sun rides a clear course at dawn. Early breezes tumble through my hair. We're greeting a world of quiet expectation, choreographed by the wind. My days are ever changing, the footing uncertain. Alone in the morning light, I struggle to learn new dance steps each time the currents shift. Children long since swept away by other breezes, scattered by other winds, plant and sow their seeds elsewhere. Through midday bluster, elder wisdom quietly whispers, celebrate this day. Do not waste time on what is gone. It is not an easy task. I breathe the afternoon hours one at a time, each moment following the next while the wind chimes spin. 70 years, the dance remains forever new. Though allegiances tether me closer to home, the setting sun still wanes glorious when the day withdraws, and the cool wind, whether in my face or at my back, still breathes life into my soul. Like a worn cloth too often scrubbed, I know I am vanishing. The vibrant colors of youth seeping inward, cradled by the breeze and the song of the wind, I dance slower on these days of long hours, with others also faded from life's sun. We laugh about our journey and hold hands as we surrender our life colors back to the earth and ride the night wind home. Tomorrow, I will pluck some weeds and change the sheets. I will listen to music and write a poem. I will call my friends, hug my love, and learn one more dance step before I sleep. Since many of you were writing about your experiences with Parkinson's, this is one that I will share with you. It's called Mourning. I cannot mourn in front of my children. I cannot share the sorrows and tears of age and illness, nor cry from the depth of my heart, nor speak of the profound and lingering losses. I cannot tell them of the pain I feel at times. They do not want to know. I cannot mourn with my children. They choose not to see the shriveled arms and shuffling gait. You are fine, they sing in their frantic dance of life. You underestimate yourself, they call over their shoulders as they race through sunny fields, flying off to catch their young, leaving me far behind in their wake. Confident, full-fledged adults with steam engine-powered muscles, their throttles smashed forward against infinity, they recognize on some transient level, I suppose, that I am something else, a specter of the mother they once had, though purposely not examined too closely, for then they might have to acknowledge the proximity of loss in their world of distant horizons. So I cannot mourn my losses with my children, but I thank God for my friends, equal in age and weariness. We sit around the table stacking our wounds like poker chips. Unashamed confessions, tethered with nods and sighs, hand clasps and hugs, learning from one another how to step forward, how to keep laughing in spite of it all, to appreciate simple pleasures and each other. We grieve and giggle on the same breath, then breathe, grieve, and giggle once again. And at day's end, I come away stronger for their strength, so that I can return to the children I adore and listen as they say, see, I told you that you were okay. Never comprehending how close to the edge I was when first awakening to morning light. But perhaps I am better off for being able to glean from their perspective, knowing that for now, this very moment, I truly am okay. I'd like to end with one. It's called Prayer. She stood facing east toward Jerusalem, open palms lifted toward the sun, catching morning rays still fragrant with early dew and allowing them to slip between her fingers. Her mantra, a gentle whisper. I ask nothing from the world this day, but to rejoice in its existence. I have nothing to offer but myself. To you who see most clearly, please accept this gift of who I am, for it is all that I have. It's from the book, Fighting the Dragon.
Thank you, Diana. Okay, I want to let everyone know before we allow people to unmute that There was a program that was sent to you via email today that had additional information about each one of the writers today. So if you're interested in finding out if they have a published book that you'd like to read entirely, or you'd like to get in contact with them, that information is listed on that handout. And if you didn't receive that, you can get in contact with us at Pro and we'll help you with that. So this ends the recorded portion of our program.